My friends and I were avid hikers, drawn to the thrill of the unexplored. Wren Lake was our next challenge, whispered about in our circles, not just for its rugged beauty, but for the eerie legends clinging to its forests. The Watchers of Wren Lake, they called them. Tall, silent figures that stood guard over sacred ground. We were skeptics, hungry for adventure, unswayed by tales designed to frighten children. We arrived at dusk, the forest already cloaking itself in shadows. Setting up camp near the lake, we planned to start our trek at first light. The air was alive with the rustling of leaves and the distant call of nightbirds. That night, as the fire crackled, we joked about the Watchers, mocking the stories. At dawn, we packed our gear and set out, the forest welcoming us with a serene silence. The path was overgrown, evidence of few visitors. Hours into our hike, the trees thickened, the air grew colder, more ancient. It was then we stumbled upon them. Standing eerily quiet at the edge of a clearing were statues, human-like forms carved from what looked like stone and wood, their faces solemn, eyes empty, yet seemingly watching. We paused, the first threads of unease sewing themselves into our hearts. The air felt charged, heavy, with an unspoken warning. We should have turned back, but curiosity, that reckless companion, urged us forward. "Let's get a closer look," I suggested, my voice a whisper, as if the forest demanded silence. We approached the statues, their details more unnerving up close. They were too lifelike, each wrinkle and curve meticulously crafted, expression somber. It was then we noticed the offerings at their feet. Small piles of stones, feathers, and what looked disturbingly like bones. "Maybe we shouldn't," Jenna, the most superstitious of our group, murmured. "These are obviously important to someone, or something." Ignoring her, Mike reached out to touch one of the statues, his hand brushing against its face. The moment he made contact, the wind picked up, a low moan echoing through the trees. The statue's eyes, previously dull and lifeless, flickered with a light from within. We stepped back in horror as the ground trembled. The statues began to move, their limbs cracking with the sound of breaking wood. They were alive, their stone-like skin rippling with each movement. We had desecrated their sacred ground. "Leave!" a voice boomed, not from one, but seeming to emanate from the forest itself. We ran, stumbling through underbrush, the sound of branches snapping behind us. Glancing back, I saw them. No longer statues, but towering humanoid creatures, their eyes glowing faintly as they watched us flee. We didn't stop running until we burst out of the forest, lungs burning. The lake now a serene contrast to the chaos behind us. The Watchers did not pursue us beyond the trees. Their territory was clearly marked, and we had violated it. Back at camp, we packed up in silence, the memory of glowing eyes etched into our minds. As we drove away, I looked back at the tree line. A figure stood there, watching. Whether in warning or farewell, I couldn't tell. We never spoke of Wren Lake again, and when others ask about the Watchers, we dismiss the tales as mere legends. But in the silent moments of the night, when the wind sounds like whispers, I remember the Watchers' eyes, and I know we walked away with more than just our lives. We left with a warning etched into our souls, a reminder that some places are meant to be left alone, guarded by those who watch and wait in the shadows. I've always had an insatiable curiosity about the uncharted and the obscure. That's what led me to the Forgotten Alley, a mythical place whispered about in the darker corners of online forums dedicated to urban exploration. They said it was an alley that didn't appear on any map, hidden in the heart of the city. If one were to find it and walk its length, they would be granted visions of their past lives, though some never returned, trapped forever in the echoes of their former selves. Equipped with these fragmented tales, I spent weeks wandering the city, tracing patterns that might reveal the alley's secret location. My breakthrough came unexpectedly from an elderly street vendor who, after a particularly engaging conversation about the city's history, mentioned a lost path where shadows whisper of other times. He refused to say more, but his pointed glance toward an old, run-down part of the city gave me enough to go on. The next day, under a gray and oppressive sky, I found it. Between a decaying bookstore and a shuttered bakery was a narrow gap, almost too small to notice unless you were looking for it. A shiver ran down my spine as I stepped forward. The air grew colder, the sounds of the city fading behind me, as if I was walking into another world. The alley was claustrophobic, the walls lined with fading murals depicting scenes from different eras, each step forward, like stepping through time. Then the visions began. Flashes of lives I'd never lived, yet felt intimately connected to. A medieval blacksmith, a 1920s jazz singer, a sailor lost at sea. Each life ended abruptly, tragically, leaving behind a lingering sense of unfinished business. Mesmerized, I continued deeper into the alley until the murals and the ground beneath my feet began to shift. The air thickened, and I found myself no longer in the alley, but on a battlefield, the clang of swords ringing in my ears. I was a soldier, fighting desperately, the memories of my past life flooding back with vivid clarity. The battle faded, and I was back in the alley, my heart pounding. I realized then that this was no ordinary place. It was a trap for the souls of those who walked here. Ensnared by their own histories, panic set in as I tried to remember the way back, but the alley seemed endless now, the entrance nowhere in sight. As I hurried forward, desperate to escape, the murals changed again. This time, they depicted a modern city, but with a chilling difference. Each scene showed a disaster, buildings in ruins, fires raging, and amidst it all, my face, always there, always watching. I reached the end of the alley, expecting to find a way out, but there was only a mirror. In it, I saw not my reflection, but a multitude of faces, all my past selves staring back at me with hollow eyes. A voice, like a whisper from the depths, echoed around me. You are the witness, bound to observe, but never to change. I understood then. The alley had chosen me, not to relive my past lives, but to bear witness to them. A custodian of histories, meant to be forgotten. With a deep, resigning breath, I stepped through the mirror, and the world shifted once more. I found myself back in the city, the sounds of life rushing to greet me. But as I looked around, I saw the faces from the murals, the people from my past lives, all here, all real. Now I walk the city, a part of it, yet forever apart, watching history unfold once more, unable to leave or change what is destined to be. The forgotten alley may not appear on any map, but it found a permanent place in me, a reminder that some mysteries are better left undiscovered. I had always been a man of science, dismissive of small-town superstitions and ghost stories. That skepticism was what drew me to Hollows, a quaint town overshadowed by an archaic legend involving its church bell, supposedly a harbinger of doom. According to local lore, the bell rang of its own accord whenever disaster loomed, a warning from the beyond. I found the idea laughable and decided it would make a fine subject for my book debunking such myths. The bell, a massive, tarnished thing, hung in the steeple of the old church at the town's heart. It hadn't rung in years, not since the last big flood which the townspeople hesitatingly attributed to its ominous tolling. My plan was simple. Prove that the bell could be manipulated, thus debunking the entire legend and reinforcing the role of rationality in the face of superstition. One crisp autumn evening, equipped with my tools and a healthy dose of cynicism, I climbed the aging wooden steps of the steeple. The bell stood silent and imposing in the dim light filtering through the dust-mottled windows. As I set up my equipment, I couldn't help but feel a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, as if the eyes of the entire town were upon me, whispering through the walls. I began my work by inspecting the bell's mechanism, determined to find a rational explanation. Perhaps it was the wind, or some cleverly rigged contraption that caused it to ring. As I examined the structure, however, I found nothing. No signs of tampering, no evidence of any mechanical triggers. Frustrated and feeling foolish, I decided to take a more direct approach. I would disable the bell completely by securing the clapper. That way, it couldn't possibly ring, I reasoned, and I would be there to witness the townspeople's reactions when their omen of disaster failed to sound. I climbed onto the narrow ledge, securing the clapper with heavy chains I had brought along. The job done, I stepped back to admire my handiwork, a smirk tugging at my lips. That's when the air shifted, growing colder, and a low rumble filled the church. At first, I thought it was thunder, but the sky had been clear. Then, without warning, the bell rang. It was a deep, sonorous toll that vibrated through the steeple, resonating in my very bones. I stared in disbelief. It was impossible. I had secured it tightly. There was no way it could move. The rumble grew louder, and the ground beneath the church shook. It dawned on me then. It wasn't a storm or an earthquake. It was the bell itself. The entire tower trembled with each ring, cracks snaking across the wooden beams, dust and debris cascading down around me. Panic seized me. I scrambled down the stairs, tripping over my feet, the sound of the bell thunderous in my ears. I burst out of the church, just as a real quake shook the ground, tearing through hollows with a ferocity that sent people screaming into the streets. Later, they said it was a minor earthquake, a rare but not unheard of event for the area. But there was nothing minor about the destruction it wrought on that old church. The steeple, weakened by my tampering and the vibrations of the bell, had collapsed, reducing the ancient bell to rubble. In the days that followed, as I helped with the cleanup, the townspeople spoke of the bell's final warning, not with fear, but with a somber respect. I could only listen in stunned silence, my skepticism shattered. The Bell of Hollows had rung true, not because of ghosts or omens, but because it was a part of something larger, perhaps a sensitivity to changes in the earth, a natural alarm long before our technology could detect it. Now, as I recount this story, the scars of that day etched into the fabric of Hollows, I find myself a changed man. No longer a skeptic, not quite a believer, but someone caught in between, respecting the mysteries of the world that perhaps should remain just that, mysteries.